Hello, 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 and welcome to the Board Game Design Variety Hour. I am your host, Matthew Dunstan. How is everyone doing this fine Monday afternoon slash morning slash middle of the night, wherever you may be? Hi, everyone who's here already. Xate's here, Rob, Robert, Al. We've got a Rory in the house as well. Welcome, everyone. It sounds like you're well into the star battles here. How is it all going? Hey, Alex, there you go. Yes, I have. Oh, okay. You don't have video. Is everyone else seeing video, or is it just me, or like is it Rob's problem? Hey, Mandela, how you going? I hope it's working. Okay, thanks, mate. Great, yeah. How's everyone going? hope you've all had a nice weekend, wherever you may be. We had some fun doing some star battles. I also got back to the star battles. I was consistently able to get a minute or less for the first book. I think only up to like one. Where am I up to? Let me have a quick check. I'm only on to 122, so Zate, you're a bit ahead of me, but I've enjoyed it. It's a really good implementation, actually. They do books, so if you can throw them if you feel like supporting them, you can purchase books of the star battles on Amazon. Yeah, it's really nice what they've done, actually. So yeah. Zate's down to 2 minutes. Excellent. I actually quite like how they are done too in increasing difficulty, so you kind of learn like certain patterns and get into them quite well. So no, that was a really nice kind of find, and well, hopefully I've started some more addictions for my viewers, which is what I'm always here for, really. Yeah, so this weekend, well, there was some work on games, and I was still working on Monumental. I think I have finally finished all of the final balancing, final little tweaks and things. There'll still be some proofreading, I'm sure, of components and rules and things before things go off to print. But I am feeling like I have just finished a big kind of project, or at least for now, which is always a nice feeling. But yeah. Yeah, Robert says I ended up seeing Star Battles, but just called Stars in Puzzle Magazine again. Yeah, they do pop up, and they're pretty well known. So it's it's nice to give them a good time. Rob has been playing some Gloomhaven Draws to the Line with his daughter, which was cool. Oh, excellent. Oh, I'd quite like to try it, I must say. I've played the first 1 or 2 scenarios of proper Gloomhaven. And there are some parts of the system I quite like. I think it's quite neat, but I have to admit the overall heft of the experience and the time it takes is a bit too much for me. So maybe Jaws the Lion is a thing I would like to that might suit me quite well. I'm not sure. Yes. So today, what is the plan? The plan is have a little bit of relaxed chit chat. To start with, maybe we'll start off with a star battle or not. I don't know. It could be a part of the new warm up part of the stream. Who knows? And then there's not a lot of news to really speak of. But we can have a look. Hey Jay, here you go. Welcome. And we'll have a look at a little bit of news, but not much. And then on to the main thing of today, which I thought I'd talk a little bit about how to. After reflecting on, I finished doing all my judging for Cardboard Edison. I ended up judging 20 games, and I just thought I'd share some of my insights, I guess, from being a judge, some of what I kind of noticed, I guess, what worked for me and what didn't, that might help you if you're thinking about pitching your game or submitting it to competitions, and maybe there's some things in there that might be useful. So also happy to answer any questions around the judging experience, I guess. I can't go into specifics about specific games, but I can talk about things generally. So hopefully it'll be interesting and useful. I've thrown up the portal to try and remind myself of some of the games, and I've got some notes about some ideas. So hopefully it won't be too much of a ramble, but we shall see what we shall see. Alex asked, "Do I have any olds?" Wouldn't use. No, I just got another contract, which is quite nice, but that is it's actually like an options contract, so it gives the publisher 3 months to continue exploring the idea. You get an advance now, and then they have like it just basically sets a period of time, 3 months, for them to make a final decision about whether they're going to go ahead with the things or not. But it's nice that that the publisher is offering that sort of earlier advance. I've seen it happen a few times, and I think it's always a nice thing that publishers are happy to put their money where their mouth is and not sort of make you wait forever for a decision, even when they have to wait, even when you have to wait a little bit longer when they need a few more months. But they want to show that they're serious about it. And another publisher actually also over the weekend offered us a larger advance because they've had to delay production of the game. So it looks like now a game is going to be one of our games with Libelud will be delayed till next year or even the year after, in fact. So either 2022 at the earliest or even possibly early 2023. So the folks at Libelud are fantastic, actually, and they've actually offered a little bit sort of a further advance as a sort of like a recompense. It's not contractually like obligated or anything like that. Although I think we have to sign a bit of an extension because everything has taken a bit longer. But but there's been a few sort of contractual things I've had to deal with, which is always a fun part of the game design journey, I guess. And I enjoyed the game jamming last week, which was nice. But I don't think I'm slowly trying to knock off some larger sort of ongoing projects so I can feel like I can work on some new projects. I've been watching a lot of MasterChef, actually, still under the excuse of preparing for this flavors game that I'm working on. But at this point, I can't joke anymore. I'm not fooling anybody. I probably just watching it for the reality TV side of things, but I quite enjoy it. For some reason, I'm watching the Canadian MasterChef. That's the one that I just started watching. I have no idea really why, but that's what I'm doing. Rob says, "Is that we'll pay you more upfront if you're patient with us?" Well, it's kind of like that. It wasn't required, but they just offered essentially. Kind of going along with it was sort of offered alongside the news of, well, look, it's going to be delayed, a bit further than you thought. It's nice when publishers are able to do that. I'm sure not every publisher can do that. The smaller publishers, you don't have that kind of luxury of funds, and I completely understand that. It's not like I require it, but it's always nice when it's done, I guess. Alex says, "I guess it helps with incomes if you're expecting to get a royalty check this year." Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I'm not quite at the point where I need to survive purely off game design, although I'm sort of transitioning to that. And yes, it would feel a bit different, but to be honest, I don't think I ever. That's going to be the thing. You can't actually rely, even when you think a game's going to come out, until you really actually have that check, and it's always kind of future income. A game gets released this year, you'll get the first royalty check potentially next year. I think it's a bit hard to plan. I think you just hope that there's enough things in the pipeline. You've got enough things that are selling regularly, that you've got a kind of a background of sales, so you don't have to expect much from the new releases, or in fact, if the new release will be released at all. So. So I wasn't relying on it, but it's nice, a little bit of extra money. I certainly can't complain. Rob saying, "Game jamming last week felt successful. Also make some good progress on the bigger game I'm working on with Alex." Fantastic here. I've been really happy with these game jams. I think Michael's was great, and Bez's I think was a great success as well. I'm sorry, actually, I didn't. I'm kind of sad I didn't get to tune in for much of the streams on the weekend. I saw Rob your game a little bit with the cake. That's your game, Rob, the cake game, right? Is it with Alex or Bez or someone else? Looked kind of fun. I think it's a really nice kind of community that's come around, and I'm maybe a little bit burnt out on roll and writes or flip and fills. I should think of a different type of game, I guess, but it just works so well for that kind of format. So it's tricky. Rob says, "I wish I had more time for game jams. Full-time work and my own stuff takes too much time." Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a luxury, but I think it is actually worth making, if it's possible. I think it's you know, a good use of time, because I think even taking a little break from other projects to sort of think about just something completely new. And the other thing I guess about a game jam is it kind of gives you the excuse to fail. Like, nobody really expects that you're going to make an amazing game out of a game jam. That's the point. The point is just to finish something. And I've said it before on the stream, you know, like, just finishing projects is so valuable. And I think a game jam in a way kind of releases you from that constraint of it has to be good or it has to be perfect. You just have to do something. And that can be really refreshing and sort of trying things. So yeah. Positives for me. But yes, I have the luxury of the time to be able to do it. Shipping Pies, that's what the game is called. So that's you, Alex, with Rory, is that right? No, roll. Okay, maybe I'm getting a bit. I'll have to check out all the details or something like that. But yeah, really glad that it's going well. Rob says it's good opportunity to work with someone new and see how you get on. Exactly, like it's yeah, just like finishing. It's a very low stakes kind of environment, and I think that's a good way to get to know somebody and get to work, because, you know, there's no expectations. If you jam for a couple of hours and nothing comes of it, you know, everyone went in with the same expectation. I think that's that's a really healthy thing, and it's a good way, kind of like speed dating, I guess, in some way. So that's cool. I'm glad it has worked out well. Yes, and well, I mean, this is actually the 30th stream, which I guess is a small milestone. I mean, you know, we're about four months in, I guess, or something like that, which is not too bad. I wasn't, and I've sort of done miscellaneous other streams, so probably closer to 40 or something like that. Hey Ross, how you going? Thanks very much. That's very kind. Yeah, so I'm, as always, very, very happy for everyone who's sort of hung around for the time. Hope it's been kind of useful. Still sort of trying to think about what I want to do in the future with the stream, and just thinking about timings of things, but you know, we'll see where that goes. One day I'll open up some sort of like feedback session or something, you know. But yeah, it's because it's interesting. I actually really enjoyed Friday's stream with the puzzles. It's sort of funny. Like, I think it you know, for me, like, game design is obviously a great thing, and it's the main reason I'm streaming, but there's lots of other things that I kind of like around that, you know, not just game designs, but, you know, puzzles and science and things like that, that is quite, that I like talking about, I guess. So maybe, who knows, there'll be more varied tasks. And if I had a computer that could handle like kind of games very well, maybe I'd do a bit more game streaming. But it's yeah, I don't know. Who knows what the future will hold? You know, as he says, and still in the middle of a pandemic. But yeah. Anyway, Rory says game jams have been cool. I've also picked up work on a browser-based game that I designed a few years ago, so it's been pretty full on with game stuff. Fantastic. Can you? Is it available for playtesting, Rory? If it's based in a browser, do let us know. I'm sure I'd certainly be happy to try it out. I'm sure a lot of people in chat would also be happy to. So if you want to whisper me the link, I can share it in chat, or yeah, just let me know, or whisper it to one of the other mods. Yeah. So, well, shall we get on to, hey Bass, how you going? Welcome. Good day to you, sir. Good day. I have got my Earl Grey tea. I hope everyone has a beverage of their choice, and cake. There seems to be a lot of people talking about cake. Made a rather excellent lasagna over the weekend. Always feels like quite an achievement to get through the lasagna, which is you know, which is quite nice. We also had Teresa and I got a little bit of a treat for us. We got a Valentine's Day kind of what would you call it? Not really a basket, a kind of like a hamper or something from a local bakery. They were doing a special over the weekend, so they're quite close to us, and it was kind of like a brunch hamper. So there was a really tasty like bagel with like, it was like an egg, bacon, avocado, and with like a bit of a salsa, kind of like red onion kind of salsa kind of bagel, and then they had two like avocado toasts with poached eggs. And they had these little tartlets kind of thing with cream and a sort of a cherry blueberry jam, and a bottle of champagne and some freshly squeezed juice. So food-wise, it was a very nice weekend. And actually, that basket did us the whole day. You know, it was like two lunch, dinner, and everything. No, it was really nice. Yeah, we've been we're not really people to celebrate Valentine's Day, but when we look back, and not that I get very personal on this stream, but you know, we've been together for yeah, about over 11 years now. So it's and the pandemic's actually been the longest continuous period of time we've actually spent living together in those 11 years. So we're very thankful for the pandemic here. It's kept me in one country, which has been quite good. Yes. Anyway, so Robin says, had no idea you were uploading this YouTube. Yeah, sorry, to YouTube too. Is there a way to mark a chat message so that you don't post it on the screen? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, I'm afraid. I can, if there's something particular you want me to edit out of a video, like maybe that you see if you saw it on YouTube, like if you're talking about a previous video, just let me know via email, Robin, or on Twitter. I'm happy to kind of edit something if you want to comment to sort of not be there if you weren't intended to do it. Yeah, unfortunately, I guess I tend to, because for those on YouTube, like if I'm talking about a comment and don't see it, but yes, edit some. Oh yes, exactly. So yes, I shall do that. So Robin, if it's in a past video, please let me know. If it was something in this video, basically just let me know and I'll edit it so that the comment isn't there. I'll edit out the thing. I'm not so like precious about my. I'm happy to keep people happy, but anyone who's watching just knows these do go onto YouTube as captures. So do let me know if there's some problem. And sorry if that wasn't clear before. Yes, enough talking about food. enough reminiscing about the weekend. I'm still playing a lot of on game side. We're still playing a lot of Santa Monica, playing some Archaea, which is a great 2-player Bruno Cathala game from Blue Orange. And what else do we play? And we're still playing a bit of First Class, kind of making our way through. Yes, okay. That okay, Robin, I can do that. Yeah, if you mark it with stars, I will try and remember. If anyone in chat wants to mark something with stars, I will not throw it up on the screen. So I will do my best with that. What about the 4 stars? Alex says the best thing about lasagna is you can infinitely stack them and you still have one lasagna. That is a very interesting mathematical fact about lasagna. It is true. We're just our normal sort of vegetarian one, but it's very, very tasty. So anyway, on to the main course of today's stream, talking about how to get your game how to stand out in a pitching sense for a new game. So for those who don't know, as a context, I was a judge for the Cardboard Edison design competition this year. The entries were due at the end of January. I think they had probably a record for them. I think they had about 240 entries or something like that, which is pretty amazing. And I think they aim that every game. I imagine every game has multiple judges looking at it, and we submit our feedback via a Google Sheet, and that's all collated, and then they do the things. And the main things that we like as a judge that you have to sort of essentially score the games on are, and I'm looking at the judging form now. We need to judge it based on like on a scale, basically like a scale of 1 to 7, based on engagement, originality of theme, and the originality of mechanics. So those are the 3 kind of things. And then you give an overall rating. We give some then a bit of like extra text. What's the game's strongest aspect? What's the game's weakest aspect? And if there's any additional comments, we can put that there. So that's the main thing. So those are the 3 things, like engagement, or I'd say like hook, or how's it standing out, like as a first glance, and then originality of theme and originality of mechanics. Those are the 3 main things that the Cardboard Edison competition wants us to judge. So of course, this is not, it's not the only things that you need to worry about when making games. So it's specific to this competition, but I think as a broad 3 categories, it's not a bad, bad things, 3 things to be looking at. And I ended up judging 20 games, a real variety of games. I'd say there's no, that's the nice thing about Cardboard Edison. It's a pretty wide audience, I'd say, and wide style of games being designed, and that's good. It does make judging things against each other a little bit difficult in a way. Like, how do you compare a 2-hour Euro game to a 10-minute party game? But I think the judging criteria kind of help you with that, because I think you know, things like the hook, like how they engage with the audience, and originality, theme mechanics are, you know, work no matter kind of the weight of the game or not, essentially. Yeah, and I thought I would just sort of share some general thoughts, feedback. I mean, it's you know, I didn't know any of the authors who designed the games. If I had, I would have kind of like said there was conflict of interest. I would have judged a different game. But I think there were some common things that sort of coming out of that might be kind of useful things to think. I must say also, it was it's a pretty new experience for me. And I appreciate how, like, I think that the top level thing, because I have a bit more of an appreciation. I like to think I had a bit of an appreciation already, but I have a greater appreciation for the kind of the work that publishers have to do, especially in a more more pressured situation like a convention. Hey Brad, how are you going? Welcome. We're talking about the Cardboard Innocent entries that I was judging and thinking about just me giving some general feedback of what I thought, you know, some common things about the entries, things that could be done better, or things that sort of came out from that might be interesting. Yeah, so anyway, but I think when you're presented with a lot of games in a short period of time, it actually, like, as much as you sort of say, well, you know, they're professionals, publishers should be able to, you know, assess a game on its merits, each one, and not be affected by all these other things. You do get affected by just the fact that it's a lot of information to take in a short period of time. I mean, you can think of it like when you're playtesting a game, as a playtester, there's a certain amount of, you know, not fatigue, but it takes energy to like learn new rules and sort of like, you know, take them on and process them essentially. And with these kind of pitching things, you have to kind of do that, but you have to do that like every 10 or 15 minutes. You know, I didn't want to spend hours on each entry. So I would end up, you know, for the entry, essentially the things you could enter was a video, usually about a 3 to 5 minute video, and a rule book. And I would watch the video and I would read the rule book, and then I would write out my kind of feedback. And I wouldn't spend more than 10 or 15 minutes per game, because I just don't, you know, I can't spend that much more time on that. And also you can't play the game, so it's you know, there's limited how much you can kind of take into that. But I think it's analogous to a pitch situation. That's about the amount of time you have to pitch a game. Realistically, like you don't get to play the game in a pitch meeting either. So I think there are definitely, like, it's quite close in that aspect. And I think I definitely have an appreciation, because when you are consuming that many new games back to back to back, there are things that are just hard. I would say, and I might be skipping, you know, I have some points written out. Hopefully it'll be in an order that's the thing. The first I'd say is like things like graphic design are important. As you know, I think I still stand by the point that things like illustrations are not important. Don't worry too much about having art for your game, but having clean and clear graphic design in both like rules and in terms of the components of the game, that is really quite important. And part of it is it's just reducing the amount of energy you as a judge needs to look at a game to understand how the game works, or even to read like what a card does. And you know, and it also helps games to some extent stand out. When you have like a lot of messy like graphic design, things just run together. It doesn't occupy a new part in your brain very well. So I think the first big point is, if you are not a great graphic designer, either talk to people who know what they're doing and ask for hints, or that would be somewhere I'd say look into process. Like, you know, if you're serious about a game and want to pitch it, that could be one place to potentially work with a professional and pay a professional for like a graphic design kind of tune-up. I'm sure there's lots of free resources out there as well, so I would recommend, you know, my advice is always do free at the start if possible. But if you're going to throw money somewhere, I would say like good graphic design, especially because once you have good graphic design, you can just keep using it. You know, you've got good graphic design on the prototype, you can use those images then on like a sell sheet or in a video. You can use them in the rules. You get to kind of reuse those assets, and that can really help, I think, just with the retention of the game. And also, you know, there is an aspect that, and I think, you know, other people have said this. I remember Daniel Solis having a similar realization, saying something on Twitter, basically saying that, you know, we are humans, and you realize that you do react better to cleaner and better graphic design. That's just how you are. You always want to look past that and kind of try and see the game itself. But there is a kind of shallow part, especially when you're judging a lot of things, in a short period of time. That kind of graphic design, that appearance, does have an effect. So that's the kind of one of the number one things I would say. There were definitely a few entries which I actually had to take more time to look at these entries and part of it was because I was intrigued because the games themselves looked quite interesting. There was one particular card game that used cards in multiple ways, essentially. They had fronts and backs, and they could be overlapped and things like that. It was really, really interesting. And the thing that absolutely let that entry down, and it would have been one of the top scoring entries of mine, probably. It was still in the top half, but it could have been like in the top 3. But unfortunately, they just had like as if they'd sort of like handwritten on a card and like hand drawn some like stick art illustration or something. And it made it really hard to read the card. And especially for a game like that where it's all about how the symbols of the cards line up and things like that. And like, if you have a game like that, gosh, you have to nail that. That's the main part that you have to get clear. But in that case, even more so, because the mechanisms of your game, the hook of your game, has to do with like all this multiple use, and you need to be able to read and understand like the graphic design to make use of that. So like that was a really clear instance where that game was just really let down by a lack of good graphic design. And as I said, it's doubly important if your game kind of is leaning mechanically into that space as well. So yeah. Rob says, I'm a big fan of reusability. There are several games I bought that use the same art of other games I already had. Oh, interesting. Like what are these published games? Like what's the example? Alex says, on a related note, Sydney Eggleston did a guide to digital pitching stream on the Tapelet Network YouTube. Indeed. If any of the mods can find that link, feel free to drop it in the chat. But yes, it was an excellent presentation. I'm sure actually some of the things I'll say here will probably overlap with it as well. Bass says it's hard not to incorporate illustrations in your design as a graphic designer, as it melds the theme with the communicative aspect. But I agree, clear graphic designs with icons and readable text is key. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's the point to take away. It's not even. Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for that link. So everyone, check out the link from Sydney. Great talk. Oh yes, all the Cuba. That's true, actually. Yeah, they do all use quite similar art. That's a good point. Yeah, I think the main thing to take away is it needs to be clear. And the sort of slightly related point is that the more beautiful it is, I'm just talking about the kind of human part of judging and of people receiving pictures, is that you are attracted to things that look good. And of course, that's completely subjective. So I wouldn't. That's like further down the line, but. Yeah, it needs to be clear. You need to be able to understand it. The quicker you can see it at a glance, which good graphic design can do, the better you stand for that. So that'd be kind of the first thing I would say, and that relates to engagement. That's especially when you're consuming games, through a video, and a lot of the time that's like components on the video. Having good graphic design is just going to make that video more impactful and easier to engage with. Yes, I am human, Zace. I am. So, yeah, I think that's the first stage of engagement, having a good, and that kind of has nothing to do with the game, right? And so that's something that I think some designers, will sometimes miss out because obviously you're worried about making a great game, and that's very important. But we're talking when you get to that pitching stage, you really have to think about how is it going to be seen when somebody else has to see it for the first time, and especially in something like this, which is essentially a blind pitch because. You can't be there to pitch the game. Your rules and your video have to stand by themselves. Which I should say to the next thing, use your video effectively. I saw, and I mean, I think this is becoming. This is becoming more and more common. As part of pitching, as normal pitching is for videos to be part of the pitch. I must say I haven't done it really at all, so I am only speaking really as a consumer or as a judge. But there are definitely a lot of different ways to do a video. I'm not saying there's only one way. I like getting to the point. I don't mind there being a bit of, you know, like 15, 20 seconds of kind of introduction or a little bit of like thematic fluff to kind of get you into the world. That can be quite nice. Do not spend 1 minute of your 3-minute video on introductory fluff, though. That is just a waste of time. And there were several videos where, you know, a third to a half of the entire video was just introductory fluff. It's not that interesting ultimately, and it's not going to make you stand out unless you have such an amazing theme that needs, you know, some sort of contextualization or explanation. But that wasn't the case in any of these. I always remember a little bit. Yeah, boring. Oh, that's a huge. We've been watching so much Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I love the reference. Yeah, we've become very addicted to Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and in fact, we're trying to find a way to somehow get the 7th season in the Czech Republic, which has so far eluded us. So yes, but the yeah. So get to the point. I'm alluded to the time when I was an interviewer for Clare College in Cambridge for incoming undergraduates, and it was similar. Like when, you know, sometimes applications spend so much time on these introductory statements about, you know, like when you just want to get to like the science and the interesting things. So yeah, as Ross said, you're boring. Get to the point. And I think the other thing is that, and this has to do with the engagement, is really choose carefully what part of the game you want to show. It's okay to not show the full game and to not go through, to not essentially like regurgitate the rules. It's not necessarily a terrible thing. Like, what am I going to basically say? It depends a little bit on the game. The simpler games, you can essentially kind of give the whole game in a pretty easily in a 2-minute video. And of course, the more complex games, and I'm probably this point is much more towards the complex end, like sort of the hour plus kind of Euro style games. Definitely choose carefully what you want to show off. If you're able to make like a clear step through of what are the key parts of the game, and then you know, like showing what the key mechanism is, and maybe some things that the player's trying to do, and you can do that clearly. I saw one instance of a really very well done video with some very good voiceover that was sort of explaining just some key points, not going through everything you do on your turn, but saying, oh, here's the key mechanism, and oh, but here's one thing that you could do, or here's another thing you could do, something like that. I think, yeah, as Robin says, show what makes it different to games, show that what is sellable for the publisher. So of course this wasn't like a publisher side, but yeah, and even not what's different from the other games, just show what your game is. There were a few too many videos, sadly, where you get to the end of the video and I'm like, don't really know what this game is. I don't know exactly how it plays. So that's the first thing. Like, it needs to show what your game is and what it does. And then I have a few other comments, and these are really aimed at the class of games which, you know, are like the 1 hour Euros plus, of which there were several things. The first thing I'm going to say is that style of game, you are just in a harder bracket for any sort of pitch, because ultimately those games usually reveal their kind of mechanical interest during play. It's much harder to like feel the hook when you show, like, if you show somebody the newest Stefan Feld game, like say Carpe Diem, for example, which doesn't have like a really clear like mechanical hook. If you show someone Carpe Diem, and you know, like, it's really hard to get across how great and tense and interesting that game is by just looking at the components, and even explaining how it plays is not going to tell you what it is. You need to kind of play it. So that's a hard task. And there are lots of games that people make in that style of game. I would say, like, at least a third of the games, a third to a half maybe of games are kind of in that bracket, and it's so Alex said, should you just say, by the way, I'm Stefan Feld and that's the hook. I'm not sure if I've told this story on stream, but yeah, once we were in Essen, Brett and I, and we had to follow we were waiting for a meeting with Queen Games, and we're like, man, they're running 15 minutes over time. That's really annoying. And the door opens, someone from Queen comes out, and then out comes Stefan Feld, and we're like, oh, so they're not going to publish anything we show them in this meeting after they've just had Stefan Feld. But yes, that could be the hook. Exactly, of course. But that's the thing. Like, if Stefan Feld didn't have that, I think if you're, I'm just saying specifically for that style of game, you have to work harder. You have to accept that it is a more difficult job. It's harder for a reviewer to see how your game works or to even be interested by it. And you have to really think about how you're going to portray that information, especially in a video. Because the other thing is with those type of games is you don't really want to, like, the rule books are often longer. It's harder to, like, it's just harder to synthesize lots of information together. And as we've established in the stream already, we're only human. So, I'm not saying I try to be diligent, but when, compared to like a 4-page rule book versus a 20-page rule book, I know which one I'm going to be able to kind of like digest more easily. And so you have such a chance in the video to sort of distill some really clean things out. And I would use that. I personally would really focus on what's the interesting, crucial choice. If you think that there's like some key choice or key mechanism, I would spend a little bit of time in that with some detail, or give as much detail so that someone can actually understand it. I think it is worth, like, normally you think about videos to give like this overview, but in that style of game, I think going into a specific, even if it's only one part of the game in the video, I think is really valuable, because at least you'll come away from that video with one thing in your head, like going like, oh, that was the game where your workers could be different colors and they do different things or something like that. And I think that's pretty useful. T-Bone said, is it useful to display a sample turn at a decision point to showcase it is genuinely fun? Absolutely. I would say yes, if it's possible to do that, even if you kind of have to engineer it. And even if you're only giving like a little insight into like one of the things the player has to think about, that helps me like at least put myself in the mind of a player and really see what you want me to see. Like, why is this game good? Yeah, and I think the main point of this kind of ramble is that just know you have a harder job, so you have to work harder to show that in a video. And there's no one way to do it, but there are far too many games where I will look at the, and one thing to also say about it is, like, I will look at, if I look at the title now and I try and remember what the game is, I have no idea with some of them, because they just don't, they mechanically doesn't stand out. And I can remember some mechanical things, and this is in contrast. There were a few heavier games, one in particular which had a very, very clear hook, and it helped that it was a physical hook in some ways. It was a sort of a component, like a type of component that had a very clear thing. The other thing that really helped it had a very clear link to the theme of the game, and it was kind of a unique take on that theme. I won't say the overall theme was unique, but this way that the mechanism thing melded. And I guess that's leading into, and a little bit of this we're in the midweight Euro rants at the moment. If you're going to make a midweight Euro, for goodness sake, choose a better theme. If you think your theme is good, it's probably not good enough. There were at least 4 or 5 mostly identical, they weren't trading in the Mediterranean, but they may as well have been. Like, they were basically, the theme was essentially placeholder or so generic as to be completely forgettable. It sounds really harsh, and I'm not particularly a thematic designer either. And I'm sure, my games in some ways would struggle. I guess my point is, I'm not saying I do it perfectly either, but from the sort of judging point of view, that doesn't help the games. It doesn't help you remember them. It doesn't help you remember clear mechanical parts, because the other thing is, if your theme doesn't have clear hooks to it, if your theme doesn't have sort of unique aspects, it's very hard to connect what mechanically you're doing interesting in the game to that theme. And I went back to my earlier point about the game that I can remember, which had this very clear link between a mechanism and the theme. I think that is becoming more and more important in these. And I mean, even outside of pitching, I'd say, like, in terms of connecting with an audience for a published game, having mechanics that meld well with the theme, that they work together, in fact, and support each other, that you utilize prior knowledge of if I'm someone and I know how water works, and then you have a mechanic in your game that uses water, and in the game the mechanic works and uses water in the way that I expect it to, water, you know, like imagine like barrage, for example, you know, like water flows downhill, and we understand that that's what water does. That's using, you know, a player's not intuition, but like knowledge of a real world thing that helps them intuit and understand a game. And that does a lot of things to help a game be more memorable and connect theme with mechanisms in a much stronger way. And I think thinking about that in terms of pitching thing also really helps. But I mean, maybe I should have started with this point is like the bar is quite high now, I would say. And I think other judges have said this on Twitter. I was actually quite surprised at I was reasonably surprised at the higher level of you know, like for an open entry competition that like anybody with $10 could enter, you know, and submit something. There was very, very few. In fact, there were only really like 1 or 2 games which I would consider to be, I mean, we've all kind of been there in playtesting situations where you have someone who hasn't really played a lot of games, they've only played with their family or friends, and they've worked on a game for 20 years, and you know these people, and that's fine. That's what they do, but you know their games are obviously a little bit out of sync with like what's going on in the current sort of publishing world. I guess I expected there to be a few more of those because that's kind of what you see in these really open competitions, but really very, very few, like 1 or 2 out of the 20 I judged. The rest, like most of them scored about at least an average, like at least a 4 out of 7. But that 4 out of 7 is actually a pretty good game. You know, and that's what I'm saying with the standard is quite high now. You really have to fire on a lot of different, like both on mechanics and theme to really stand out. And I think that's why I'm coming back to this when thinking about these kind of generic themes for the Euros. Unfortunately, there are a few too many of these kind of Euro games, which I'm sure have quite interesting mechanisms. But unfortunately, when you put them all next to each other, and they all have kind of similarly forgettable themes and some sort of mechanical twist, but it's not enough to sort of like, you know, like stick in your mind, you're going to suffer in that sort of environment. So that's just something like I think really working hard to come up with a theme which makes sense. And even if you're not going to have a theme that necessarily like melds really well with the mechanisms, then choose something. I would actually choose something realistic to start with. If you're going to choose something generic, choose something realistic. There's too many like, you know, random sci-fi or like fantasy shop or like I'm in this fantasy world and I'm going to build these bridges, and it just if you're going to go generic, at least go realistic because it helps a player like a judge actually understand the game because it's connecting to something realistic that they might sort of understand in their real life. Yeah, so that's sort of a thing I would sort of say. It's Monopoly, but better. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. There was definitely one which was completely, but it was actually really there was only one which was like completely at that level. There was another one that was a bit on the boundary, but the rest were like very serious and pretty reasonable entries, I'd say. This is like a normal game that doesn't have separate chance and confusion chess. Brad says it definitely is a different skill set, pitching versus designing. Makes me wonder if there will sometimes be professional pitchers offering their services like there are developers. I mean, there already are, actually. I mean, I guess that's kind of what agents are. And you do obviously see that in like the Hasbro kind of world. There is a company called Forge Next, for example, in France, run by Gaetan Beaugenot. I can't remember his last name, but he's like that. He's essentially an agent, and he helps place prototypes with publishers, and the publishers know him very well, and he has individualized contracts with designers, and then his job is to sometimes help develop the game a little bit, but primarily to show it to publishers to try and place the games with publishers. So this does happen. I guess the tricky thing is that it's just like another expense on your side. You know, like it's, as a designer, there's not a lot of money to be made anyway. And the moment you start involving more people and more cuts and things like that, it gets hard. But yeah, if you know that you are not good at pitching a game, then they can be valuable. Like, I guess it's, you have to work out, is it valuable for you or not? How important is it, you know, to place the game with a publisher? And sometimes the other good thing about an agent and a reputable agent is they also know if the game is not really good enough. And hopefully they would tell you, you know, when you come up with them, like, can you sell the game? It's like, well, actually, no, because it needs to be worked on before I think it get to a publisher. Unfortunately, you do hear stories about some unscrupulous people as well. So I would yeah, if anyone's watching and thinking about agents, definitely try and get opinions, talk to other people in the industry. I think this is always the case. If you don't know about something, talk to other people. People are usually quite forthcoming with information and will let you know what their experiences were. That kind of thing is quite important, and hopefully, saves you as much from bad actors in the space, because I think especially in like this agent thing, it does sometimes happen, unfortunately. But there are a lot of things about pitching, and I think also like these kind of blind like virtual pitching is another thing altogether, because it's also like making a good video and making good rules. Those are also different skills as to actually like pitching in person. So there's lots of sort of things to think about. But going back to the point that the standard is very high, you just have to know that. I do feel for some of the entrants, I think, that they will get their feedback and they'll go like, it's quite positive feedback, and they'll get 4 out of 7 or something. And it's just that it's a hard field now. Like maybe it always was hard, but the standard designing, which is great, has gone up, but it means that you need even more to stand out. Just from a fan, like even if you do everything right in terms of like a video and like how you graphic design and how you present the game, it still has to be a great game. And I guess that's why, like, when you have these things, the games which could be quite interesting mechanically, but they have just a completely generic theme, that unfortunately just kind of brings them down. I mean, in something like Hardware Edison, where like one of the 3 things is originality of theme, if you have a completely generic theme, you're kind of giving up on one of the 3 characteristics. And I'm sure I don't know if they directly say this to the entrants. I suppose they do. Rob says it can be harsh to grade on a curve when your work is just good. Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And it also reminds me, weirdly enough, as I said before, there are real echoes of interviewing for Cambridge colleges. One day on a completely off-topic thing, I'll talk about that, because for those who are in the UK, it's such a, as I understand it, like it's a huge thing to go to Cambridge or Oxford, and that interview process is incredibly difficult. And for us interviewers, we're seeing people at the end of a process. These are like the 30 or 40, 50 people out of like hundreds that may have applied, and they're all amazing. Realistically, there's not really many duds in all of that. You're at the top, percentage points. And yeah, you have to unfortunately, because the object is to choose X number of people to attend, you do kind of have to, not necessarily on a curve, but you have to differentiate between people. You can't just give everybody 8 out of 10, because it doesn't achieve what you need to do, which is to get the next cut. And the same is for Carbon Edison, right? They need to cut from these 240 entries to, I don't know how many they put into the next round, like 40, I think, where games will actually be play tested. Alex says my friend got 4 top grade A levels and didn't get in. Yeah, it's rough, I would say. My personal belief, and this isn't really a fault of the college I was part of. I think the whole system is completely antiquated. Cambridge or Oxford will tell you that it somehow helps select for people who are able to handle the rigors of science, blah blah blah, or whatever. And I was in the sciences, so I know that's my experience. But to be honest, it all kind of a lot. There's a lot of things that have nothing to do with the applicant that will affect the results. And when you look at the entire cost, like economically, the cost for like the colleges, like the emotional cost for the participants, when you put all that together, I can't help but think that it's just not worth it anymore. I'm not saying that necessarily taking a test to get in is necessarily a better thing, but when a test is going to eventually, like, basically gives them the same result, I think, or the same kind of fidelity, and it's much more accessible for a much larger range of people, I absolutely firmly stand by that. It still is, the interviews are unfortunately still discriminatory in the sense that if you go to I always get mixed up with private and public schools in the UK. I use the wrong word, but like a school where you have to pay for, like an expensive, hard school. Those people there are just coached to get in. And actually the hard part as an interviewer is to work out how much the person has been coached and how much they haven't, because you do try to take that into account, because it's just not fair for those who don't have that kind of preparation. Anyway, I've completely gone off topic, but I will happy to talk more about that sometime. I guess most of these applicants never failed at anything in their lives, had a lesson. Yeah, It's tough, but I just think there's just more humane ways to do it. Like, it's hard for me to be too harsh on any of them when I see, you have like 16, 17-year-olds who are literally shaking and like on the verge of tears and under so much stress, so much. And it's for what, it's tough. Anyway, Vass says, still wonder how tough it is to stand out. But on the other hand, publishers tend to come out with games that look a lot like others or just money grabbers. I sometimes feel like some true original ideas might be placed aside as it might not be the answer to the current market. Yeah, and it actually is, follows on well from the Cambridge interviews. And my point about why the Cambridge interviews aren't great is that I don't think they're good at necessarily discovering like the diamonds in the rough necessarily. That's what Cambridge and Oxford would have you believe. I think sometimes it does work, but there are as many, there are as many like false negatives as there are like true positives, or like you miss as many as you get, sort of thing. And I think the same is for games. That's I think take everything anybody says about this thing with a grain of salt. There are so many things that go into the decision about whether a game gets published or not that like you can't control for all of it, and a bunch of the stuff has nothing to do with the game or the designer or anything. It can be just how like, what did the person you're pitching to have for lunch today, or what? Not sorry, that's not very kind. Like, what kind of day did they have? How much energy do they have? What does the publisher have in their line already? What are they thinking about? What game do they see on Kickstarter the other week and they go like, man, we need a game like that. There's so many things go into it that you can't control. So I think you just have to go in with it, just do your best, try and not control, but try and work on the things you can work on. But accept that there are going to be some things out of your control, essentially. Rob says, I think that if you're approaching a publisher rather than a contest, you stand out by tuning your pitch game to the specific publisher. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. And yeah, the competition is obviously a different thing, and each of the judges are going to have a different kind of take on things. Like this is my feedback for the games, but obviously another judge might value other things in games, like the kind of categories that we're judging on are still fairly broad. So there's certainly much, there's a lot up to interpretation, I would say. And so yeah, don't take this as gospel. I think as anything I say, don't take this as gospel. It's just one person's kind of opinion and take on it. And as we said, we're human. We have to find a way to differentiate with the games, and we don't have to grade to a curve, but we do have to differentiate between the games. And that if a game is good, you need to, if you put everything at the same mark, then it's not going to help the games come out. And ultimately, the thing is, the games that really did stand out, they kind of fired on all three cylinders. They were engaging, that they were mechanically interesting, or at least they showed that they clearly showed how mechanically interesting they were, and they had a great theme, or a theme that really made sense with the mechanics. Alex said there were some pretty shocking statistics about judges and how lunchtime affected the judgments there. Hope you're first up, basically. Yeah. Well, it's true, and I mean, I'm sure it's there's a big difference to pitching your game first in the morning when the publisher is fresh, versus being like their 20th meeting for the day. And I took breaks. I didn't do it all in one go, so hopefully I didn't get too tired or anything like that. I tried to do my best for that. Yeah, so what are some other points that I would have? Maybe this is a bit more for the competition than, again, necessary for a publisher. But I would say also it's better to have one amazing thing and one not so great thing than to have a bunch of average. It relates a little bit to the point about the standard being very high. If you have one thing that is very interesting or very unique, can't be very unique, it stands out a lot, that seems to be quite an innovation, like, it's good to have that. And then even if you do have a completely generic theme, it's better than having a marginally better theme and like a much more generic mechanism. No worries, Rob. Hope look away, enjoy. I think that is kind of the standing out thing. And if you can have one thing that really helps you stand out, even if the rest of the game is hard to explain, or it's hard to sort of tell people about, I think finding, it just helps things stand out. It helps people remember the games. And I guess the way I always thought of the games, or at least my judging thing, was that I was much more forgiving of games where I thought that there was like a nugget of something really original or interesting. And I was more forgiving, I think, then, or at least like the averages would be higher, because you kind of have to balance all these things. Like you get all the like 3 marks, and how do you give do you give like a complete average of those 3, or do you, how do you come up with your like final grade, so to speak? But having one part that is particularly interesting, or like, so I guess the point is, despite everything I've sort of talked about, it is still about the game. And if you have something truly special or interesting, then that's really powerful. And so that can sometimes be something still worth of, I guess, when you're thinking about what ideas to work on, maybe you think about at the very early stage of which project you want to keep going with or not. Those games have the ability to really stand, or to be a bit of like a real step change from other games. They might not work on other levels, or they might not have a great theme or whatever, but having some way to really break through and be something a bit new really helps in this kind of competition. I'm not saying it, in terms of getting published, it's a little bit different, but I guess I'm just thinking of a couple of games that I think did that very well. Roman says, was the conveyor belt the hook that you used to pitch the chocolate factory? Yeah, it was. It was called, it was actually with another publisher before it got to Alley Cat. It was with that publisher for quite a while, but it was affectionately called Q Burner 3000 with that publisher. So it was essentially athematic, and actually all the way working on that game, it was the physical aspect. It was actually one of the prototype itself had a physical, Brett like glued together a couple of boards together, like a dual layer board, and we had like old kind of Carcassonne tiles that were like the things you'd push through. So it was completely physical. It was somewhat quite similar to how the final game works. That was always present in the prototype, and yeah, it absolutely helped give that feeling of the game. And everything around the game is maybe not particularly original, or you've seen in other games, but it was really easy to see what the interesting part, I think the reason why we knew it was strong is not only was it a hook, but it was actually enjoyable. Like it was the focal point of a pitch, but it was also the focal point for a player, because when you're playing the game, that is the thing you want to play with. That's the focal point. So I think those are the best hooks. The best hooks are the ones that are both kind of the things that make you look at the game from the other side of the room, but also when you're at the table, that they keep your attention and that they're the thing you want to work with. Those are the strongest hooks, because it's very different when you have a hook that's just a gimmick. I think that's the difference between a hook and a gimmick, right? A gimmick can look amazing from the other side of the room, but when you sit in there, you're like, well, but this could be anything, or this doesn't need to be in the game. But the best hooks are the ones where you sit down and they keep like, wow, not only this is a cool hook, but thinking about it is really like, think about the gears in Zolkin, for example. I think is a good example that the gears not only look amazing, but mechanically and how you play the game, they're a real focal point for the player. So yeah, thinking about that is true. So I'm going to keep remembering to drink, because I haven't drank much of my tea as we pass the hour mark. I went on a bit of a rant about more complex games. I guess the flip side, I would say, maybe a general thing is, if you had a choice of what game to put into a competition, I would always choose the simpler game. I think you're going to have an easier time of it, especially like a speed pitching kind of thing in person as well. Obviously, you don't always have the choice, but that would be something I'd quickly say. Robin also has a piece of advice. When we're practicing pitching, take published games and see if you can find the hook that may have been used to pitch it, and then try and pitch the finished game. Would you buy your pitch? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point, actually. Any way that you can just practice even the act of pitching. Obviously, finding the hook is really important, but anytime that you can kind of get used to presenting a game is also important. Like, I tend to think that actually they're not exactly the same skill, but like teaching rules for a game are a little bit simpler, because it's also how can you kind of like convey information to other people in kind of understandable way, often in a short period of time. I'm pretty good. I'm the one who teaches games in our group or whatever. I'm used to that, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it, and I think that has helped me pitch games well, because I can condense them and I can understand how to structure information so that people can understand it. So that's why I would sort of say, yeah, like the hook, finding the hooks are very important, but even just practicing, like presenting a game. And I think I would say, like, if you don't normally teach games, teaching games is, as I said, not exactly the same, but I think you'll learn some similar skills about how to like convey information that would be very useful as well. But thanks, Robin. That's a really good tip. So going away from the more complicated games, the other kind of thing that ran through a few games is if you have a party game, don't overcomplicate it. There were, unfortunately, a few quite promising party games, which just, for whatever reason, in my opinion, added completely extraneous things to the game. I think, people talk about find the fun and all this sort of stuff, but you have to know what your game is, and you have to know what the best part of your game is. If the best part of your game is like screwing over your friends, then don't make them have to like shuffle a deck of 50 cards and deal them all out to each other and choose which card to play, to get to that fun bit of screwing over your friends. If your game is all about like telling stories and making stories, don't introduce 5 different mechanisms to like give them a guide how to make a story, when realistically, like, actually a very like faint outline or a nudge will be enough to get people to make interesting stories. That also came up quite a bit, that it was like, don't be afraid to make your game as simple as it is, I guess. I think it can be a little bit, when you start off, I think I had a bit of this feeling when I was starting, was like, if you pitch a game and there's not much to it, you're like, well, what did I make? Like, anybody can make this. Why would I enter this? But I guess don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to put more into the game than there needs to be. And I hope that judges, and I certainly do appreciate, like, I can see the beauty in a very simple idea and executed well. And there are a couple of great examples of that in Enters the Competition, where I could explain the game to you in one sentence, essentially. And the game itself doesn't play out much more than that one sentence. But it's such a great idea and well executed that it got a very high mark from me. Unfortunately, there were a few other games which, again, I think would have really fun kind of like play styles and things that happen in the game, but they were just overcomplicated with just too much stuff that doesn't suit these like shorter like storytelling or party style games. And that was sort of a common sort of thing. Alex said, I made a couple of pitch videos. Just watching it back was really helpful to see if I was hitting the right points, presenting the interesting parts as well. Yeah, definitely. And get feedback if you can. Like, pitch to other people who don't know your game. I think take the opportunity to practice with other people. When I was at Scientist and we had to give a talk at a conference, you wouldn't just give the talk at the conference the first time. You would practice by yourself. You'd practice with your family. You'd practice with random coworkers. Take every opportunity to just practice that. Because it's not even just about, obviously, like working out if what you're presenting is correct, but even just getting used to doing that. We don't, some of us don't necessarily do a lot of like that kind of speaking or meeting in our normal day lives. So if you don't do that, just even practicing it will give you more confidence, help you kind of hit the points regularly and with consistency. So yeah, definitely. Robin said, what's in it for me, Mr. Brett Gilbert, when playtesting one of my games? Still sits with me, and I ask myself this a lot when designing games. Yeah, Brett is... he's blunt. He's become, well, he was blunt from the beginning, but I think has become more and more blunt. And I suspect, I think we all do to a certain extent, because after you've playtested lots and lots of games, you kind of see the same things coming out, and so yeah, giving a player a reason to care, especially about a choice, is quite important. One other kind of bit of feedback that there were in a couple of games, I would say, and this is more a general kind of bit of feedback about design, is be careful about introducing more decisions that are necessary or interesting in your game. And I guess I think I call them false decisions. I think you have to be very careful of, like, realize what's the really interesting thing a player's doing on the turn. This is especially true of like the kind of like the really, like, these kind of like 30-minute like family style games, which I enjoy designing and I enjoy playing quite a bit. But just be careful that you're not adding, they're not necessarily overcomplicating the game, but if you're adding choices which are just ultimately not very interesting, or if you're adding choices which are inviting a player to try and like pass a lot of information, but ultimately aren't that important. For example, if I, imagine a draft, like, I don't know, like something that comes up quite a bit, or you can imagine it, like if you have like an open river of cards that you're drafting from, And on a player's turn, you say, okay, do your stuff with a row, but at the end of your turn, you have to choose a card in that row that you're going to discard that nobody else will get. That is, I think, a perfect example of a kind of like a false decision or kind of like a nothing decision, because you're asking a player to kind of try and work out like what's the relative value of all those cards in the middle to all the other players. And ultimately, the result of that decision is like a very marginal benefit to them. Like maybe they've prevented a player from getting exactly the card they wanted, maybe. But most likely it might not have had any effect at all. Maybe the player was going to take something else, or something else came up anyway that they meant they didn't want that choice. So compared to all the interesting things you might be doing on your turn, why ask players to make more choices that just don't compare to the interest of the main part of the game? And if there's a big difference, just get rid of the choice. Make it automatic. That's why you see so many of these, like, where you have a central market, like the thing that's, the furthest away from the deck falls off every turn. Like, don't put a choice in there if it's not necessary. That came out a little bit. Robert said, I've had this a lot with my game. Finding in some admin steps, adding more automation and removing choice is improving player experience. Absolutely, yeah. I think it just lets people, really focus on what's the best part of the game. Because ultimately, not everything in a game you do is equal in terms of like what's the really interesting, like cool, kind of like brain burning part. And you kind of just want to do all you can to like help the player do that thing as much as they can. Like there's a balance as well, like having, if it's too brain burning, you need a little bit of a break and you do other things. But if there's just something really engaging and fun, you want to expand, expand as much as possible on doing that fun thing. You don't want to waste time doing other stuff. So yeah, automating things, not people sort of talk about like the like choice fatigue. Like we actually get tired because we have to make lots of choices. So just taking away choices which aren't that meaningful is good. Yeah. I think those were kind of the main things. Yeah, and I guess the other thing is a more general thing, is about writing rules. And please add images to rules, especially in something like this, especially in a competition where you are judged on a video and a rule sheet. Please add images to your rules, like graphics, like some way to help me visualize the game that's not just text. It's just harder to like imagine a game from like a wall of like 5 pages of text than to have like 1 or 2 diagrams. I'm not saying they have to be very good, but it just helps not only from like the looking at the page and breaking up the kind of flow of it, but also helping you like get a lot of information from a short period of time that's kind of easier to pass. I would also say that's something to try and do. Yeah, anyway, I think those are the main things. But if you have questions, people have been asking in the chat as we go, which is great. Thank you very much. But if there's anything I said that you want more information on, ask away. Hope it was sort of vaguely useful to folks. But yeah, overall, Alex says, would you include an example of play? Yeah, definitely include a setup if you can. That helps you immediately understand kind of the scope of the game. And if you can involve like a sample turn, that's great. There were a couple of games that did that were kind of more, not complicated, but they were sort of harder to understand, like, card kind of games, and having that example was kind of great. Like honestly, I think if you're ever adding things in rules, if you're adding like images and examples, I don't think you could ever have too many of those realistically. I think it's very hard to overdo that. So I'd always lean on having more of that. You can definitely have too many blocks of text, but yeah, if you're putting more images or more examples, I think that's always a good thing. I would say, as long as it's like well organized and you can understand what it is. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to do. Yeah, but generally the entries were really strong, and kudos to those who entered. I think it's it's a really promising. It's great to see. It's great, and you do like completely apart from like the advice and sort of side of things. It was really nice to. It's always nice to see ideas. You're like, oh yeah, wow, that's really new, or that's really cool, and you just sort of not that I'm too, what was the word? I'm not too jaded. I don't think I'm particularly jaded, but sometimes when you just, I don't know, like as some folks have sort of talked about, you see companies making the same kind of games and rehashing things. Sometimes these things, competition can be great to just see something like a breath of fresh air, and you're like, man, that's really cool. That's a really cool new kind of idea. I really hope that it gets published, and also sometimes you see games which have suffered a few of the faults that I've sort of talked about, but they have the gem of something that's so interesting that I just want to, I tried to like put extra comments, which are sort of like saying, this will help you do better in the future, even if you don't do well in this competition. Like, these are the things that hopefully will help your game, stand out to a publisher, or to like be more like comprehensible to a publisher, because I'd love to see them succeed. But it was I would definitely do it. I would definitely do it again. I'm not sure if I'm going to. I said I would be happy to possibly play, because the next stage is where they actually like mail prototypes to judges and you actually play. Or I think possibly they'll do some virtually this year, like on Tabletop Simulator, I imagine. I might do a bit of that. It'll depend, I guess, what they need. But we shall see what we shall see. But anyway, even if it just stops there, it was a good experience. I'm glad I did it. Hopefully, it was useful. I hope the comments were useful enough. It's always a balance. Like you try and write as much as you can. But you also want to be positive. You don't want to be, or constructive rather. And you want to focus on that construction. And I'm not one to like build out like reams and reams of text just to say a couple of points. So I tried to get to the point, and hopefully that's useful. Alex says, there were 2 entry categories and 2 winners last year, I think, physical and digital. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Interesting. I guess that makes sense. And because there are definitely some games which I can imagine probably would just not work digitally. But that's it's good that they do that kind of that break. So I think that is. Oh yes, thank you. Oh, thank you for the follow. Do him, and D Anchor. Thank you very much for the follow. Sorry, I don't have any. Completely amateur here. I may be a semi-professional game designer, but I am very much an amateur streamer. So, but thank you very much for follow, and thank you for the reminder to drink. I've tried to. If I actually finish my tea before the stream ends, I've done well, because usually I end the stream and my tea is mostly undrunk. So I think I haven't done too badly. Yes. So that will that'll probably do me for today, roughly. If anyone has more questions, throw them in the chat. Always happy to chat about other things, or non-game things. Let me know. I won't be streaming on Wednesday this week. I have an appointment on Wednesday morning, so there will be no board game cuppa this week. So I will be streaming as normal on Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. GMT as normal. Thanks very much, Baz. Hopefully it was useful. It's trying to structure my thoughts in some sort of way, but hopefully it wasn't too bad. Yes, I wasn't as sometimes I have a presentation or something, but not today. Yes, no couple of days this time. I could try and do a very quick stream, but it would be cutting it a bit fine for my appointment. So yes, and because it involves me getting a visa to be able to work in the UK, I probably should not be late. Well, anyway, it's fine. Well, I hope everyone has a fantastic week. I hope you're all safe and well wherever you are. And just hope people are well as best as can be, as hoped in these times. And let's go a raiding someone potentially. If anyone has a suggestion of who to, Bez is actually streaming, so maybe we could go and raid Bez. That would be nice. Oh, thanks very much, Russ. Really means a lot. Thank you. Let's go over and say hi to Bez. Take care, everyone. I want to check out Ross's stream later this evening, I should say. 7 p.m. GMT. Ross can correct me if I'm wrong. More games, please. Check Ross's stream out. Probably wrapping up. Okay, we'll get in there quickly, I guess. My evening is spent updating games. Another meeting with potential publisher Saturday. Oh, yes. Oh, fantastic. Oh, well, good luck with that. I hope it goes well. Great. Okay, let's raid while Bez is still going. But have a great week, everyone. And I shall see you all on Friday. Thanks very much. Cool. All right, let's go. Bye, everyone.